everyone, welcome back to the Cheap channel, the channel dedicated to all things cheap in the world of fragrances. And in today's video, we're taking a look at a line of fragrances that I'm sure you've seen if you've been out anywhere in any kind of rack stores, especially at Ross and at Marshall's and Burlington. And you can also find these at most of the online fragrance discounters, especially fragrancebuy.ca. They have a whole slew, I think really the whole line of fragrances that this company makes. And what I'm talking about is none other than Cuba Paris, or the Cuba fragrances that you know of that come in the cigar looking boxes and bottles that have a very catchy presentation. You immediately, when you see it, you know automatically what it is, who it's made by, and you probably have seen it and thought to yourself, this is very cheap, this is very tacky, I just really don't want to smell that. And that's what I thought too. I kept seeing it and I was like, I'm never going to buy that. That just looks like it would smell awful. And then I'll watch one of Real Men, Real Style with Antonio Centeno. I watched one of his videos and it was a whole video on cheapies that he would recommend. And he mentioned the Cuba fragrances. And so I was like, well, maybe they're not that bad. I'll try it out and see how it is. And I bought one of these boxes that you've no doubt seen everywhere. And it looks like this here. It comes in a 4-pack. It is a gold, an orange, a red, and a blue, and it says Cuba at the top, Cuba Classic. And the box is a very cheaply made box, to be honest. It's nothing too fancy, just a regular cardboard, but very thin cardboard box. And you see all the fragrances lined up in there, like cigars lined up in a holder. It's a very classic Cuba look, and it's very actually distinct. Even though it is cheap and tacky, you gotta say it is distinct. As soon as you see them, you know immediately what company they're from. So at least they've known how to market it very well, and they've become an icon in the cheap fragrance world. But I was wanting to go through these for you so that if you do see this out there and you've heard what I've said and it's convinced you that you might be able to buy it and try it out for yourself and see what you think about it. And like I've said, fragrancebuy.ca has the whole line of fragrances that Cuba Paris has made all through all their classics, all their releases, I guess unless they've been discontinued, but they have them all on there and they're very cheap. I think that the 30 mils, which is what these are here, come like $5. And then the larger sizes come at around $9 to $10. So it's not really bad at all. So you're looking at under $10 for any of their sizes and fragrances, unless it comes in like the packs, I guess. Even this pack that I got here was like $10.99 at Ross. So you're looking at a little under $4 per fragrance in this box, which is super cheap. I think probably the cheapest we've talked about on this channel so far, and maybe even to come. It's just very cheap. And so when you get it, you're not going to expect much. You're going to expect it to be very synthetic and not well put together. But that's exactly what I want to get into. Is that really the case when you're getting these, or is it something that's very surprising? If there is any of these hidden gems in here, and if there is, are there any that I can recommend to you to wear for a regular wear? But to start off, we're going to quickly look at the presentation, which looks like this, or at least in the 30 ml size bottles, which is the ones you're going to probably find a lot more often, especially at that $5 or $4 or below mark online. And they come in a cigar looking bottle, and it really does look like the real deal, especially if I hold it very convincingly on camera. It looks like a cigar, which is pretty cool. And just because I gotta mention it, I'm gonna look at the atomizer. The top is just a flimsy, kind of see-through plastic top, but the atomizer is just a colorless atomizer where you just see the crimp around it. And the spray on the atomizer isn't really much. Again, you're just looking at a sub $5 fragrance, a 30 ml. It's just nothing really to be impressed about, but it does get the fragrance out, and it's a fairly good puff. And with these bottles, it is actually a glass bottle, so it's not plastic like what I was originally expecting. And there's also a texture to the bottle, like an actual paper wrap kind of wrinkle, which makes it a very nice touch added to this cheap presentation. But now to go ahead and get into the fragrances themselves, starting with this one here. So all of them will have the same presentation, but a different color on the wrap. And on the wrap, it'll also tell the name of it. This one is Cuba Gold. It has a gold wrap around it. Cuba Gold is a great one to start with because this is kind of the one that everyone in the fragrance community talks about and brags about as being the best bang for buck. That if you get no other Cuba fragrances, you have to get this one here. And the reason is because this comes off with a very nice lavender, vanilla, very powdery, aromatic, sweet, and very clean, and almost a little sensual. And it's very, very reminiscent to Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Male from the 90s, the original Le Male. And there's a whole kind of conspiracy and rumor about that this actually came out before Le Male, and there's a lot of back and forth on that Fragrantica put the date that this came out before the date that Le Male did, and there's a lot of ruckus about it, so they took the date off the website. But people still consider this as being a precursor to Le Male, that Le Male actually ripped this off. But I'm not here to get into all that conspiracy and drama. I'm just here to tell you what this smells like and how good it is. And I will say this is extremely, extremely good, and it is very, very close to Le Male. So if you do like Le Male and those old style fragrances, especially the style that is, you will absolutely love this one. Just to go through the notes real quick, it's almost the same as how Le Male presents it, but there's not really a lot of notes in this at all. You have a top notes of pink pepper and grapefruit. You have middle notes of lavender and vetiver, and base notes of course, vanilla, amber, and tonka bean. And I almost forgot to talk about that tonka bean. It is very evident in this, adding even more to that powdery sweetness. This just smells very clean, again, very sweet, vanilla, very classy and professional. This would make a wonderful office scent. I think you can wear this all year round. You may have to spray more on in the colder weather, because I will say performance on this is actually okay for the price and how cheap it is and the quality, but this is easily one of my favorites in all of the Cuba fragrances I've smelled so far. I think it's just so clean, so well done, excellently blended. There's nothing that really stands out. And yes, it does have a cheap nature to it, because I mean, you're paying less than $5 on this really, but for what it is an incredible smell, especially how they're able to replicate that Jean-Paul Gaultier Le Male kind of style. It is just really, really nice. And because of the form factor this is in, it makes it perfect for traveling, so you can easily stick this in your bag or in your coat, carry it with you, and respray and apply wherever you are whenever it's needed. Again, this is a great start before we get into the rest of these, and I highly would recommend this one. It is Cuba Gold. And now on to the next one, which is this one right here. It is Cuba Orange with an orange wrap at the top. When you first spray the fragrance on, this is of course, as the color and name would imply, a very orange forward, and it's spicy and it's woody, it has some florals in it, and it's hard to find a note breakdown on Fragrantica on this one, so I'm just going to tell you what they have. They just have spices, they have sandalwood, they have jasmine, and they have Virginia cedar. And you can smell the woods as you go into the fragrance a little more, but immediately what you get is a spicy orange. You get a lot of sweetness. There is some vanilla that comes out in this, almost giving like creamsicle kind of vibe to it. And even though it's not listed, I actually do get a tobacco kind of note to it. And maybe that's just mentally tricking me because it is in a cigar, but I do think there is a tobacco kind of nuance in almost all of Cuba's stuff somewhere, but especially even in this, I definitely smell a tobacco kind of background to it, which makes this an actually very interesting fragrance. You do get a little tanginess from that orange at the top, and a lot of people complain saying that this orange smells very synthetic, that it smells like orange glow, that stuff you wipe your wood furniture with, and of course it's synthetic. I mean, this is a sub $5 fragrance. I don't know what you can expect from this. There's not gonna be a lot of naturals, if any naturals, in this. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sell it for so cheap. But still, with that orange to me is still very appealing, especially when the sweetness is added in with it, and those spices come out behind with it, and you have that woody base, and like I said, that kind of white floral and tobacco kind of background. It becomes an extremely pleasant scent, especially on skin. When you smell it on test strip, it's gonna smell okay, but on skin, which is again where it's meant to be, it becomes even deeper, richer, sweeter, a little powderiness in there. It just becomes more full on your skin. And I think that this is a wonderful spring, summer, and fall fragrance. You might have to spray a little more as it gets into the colder part of fall, but it works great the rest of the season. I think day or night is great. I think it's actually a good office scent as well. Just don't overspray on it. Again, like the other one, performance is okay for the price. It's not gonna be monstrous. It's not gonna be the longest lasting, but it's a very nice skin scent after it starts drying down. It's just an overall very, very welcoming fragrance. I don't think anybody's gonna really complain when they smell this on you, because it does smell very enticing and it smells very welcoming. It's not gonna be anything that breaks the mold, but it's also something that you wouldn't expect from this price range. I rate this second under the gold in my book, but I would highly recommend that you try this. It's really nice, and I really think that you would like it as well. It is this one here, it is Cuba Orange. Now on to the next one, and it is this one here with a red wrap around it, and it's called, as you can see, Cuba Red. It is one that when you first spray it, it's gonna be a very fresh spiciness to it, a little bit of a citrus kick on the top, but then you quickly get into some deeper spices like nutmeg and clove and cinnamon, like that allspice kind of feel. A little bit of woodiness, a little bit of an earthiness, and a little bit of a tobacco kind of scent to it. And Fragrantica doesn't have any kind of note listing on this as well, except for under their images. It has, of course, tobacco, it has spices, it has woodsy notes, and it has oak moss. And the designer fragrance that people compare this to a lot is Burberry's London, which I really, really like. It's a personal favorite cheapie of mine. I hail it. Very high on that totem pole of cheapies that anyone should get and own. But I will say that this does not have the full essence of Burberry London. It is not as sweet as Burberry London is. It is not as noticeable on that cinnamon, and it's a little more fresh, especially on the top and mid, unlike Burberry London. Burberry London quickly gets into the spices and that port wine and the liquor kind of note to it, that booziness, and those that tobacco is a lot more prominent in that than it is in this. You can smell it, but it's not as noticeable. It's not as rich in this, not as deep, but you do get that Burberry London kind of essence in this, and especially with that tobacco and the spices, that mainly is what ties it in with that. This is a little more woodsy in the middle and dry down than Burberry London is, a little more again on that mossy side, a slight, not really a greenness, but a little bit of an earthiness in it. I really prefer Burberry London a lot more because I love that sweetness in it and that Christmassy kind of vibe with the allspice and sweetness and tobacco. But this one does get you a little bit of the way there. Not all the way, but just a tad bit. It is definitely familiar with it, but not all the way in. Like Burberry London, this can also be worn in the same kind of situations. It's still very classy, still very mature, and actually fairly versatile. And because of that little added freshness that isn't as sweet and as deep as Burberry London, I would actually say you can wear this as a year-round signature. Maybe not in the hot, hot summer, depending on how much you spray on, but the rest of the year, even on cool summer nights, I think you can pull this off because performance, again, is okay. It is not actually as good as the first two that I talked about. This will dissipate way quicker on your skin, but because of that, you probably can get away with it in situations that you couldn't with Burberry London. Like I said, that summer heat, you could probably get away with it in the cooler side of summer or at nighttime. And because the performance isn't so loud, you're not gonna choke anybody out. And you can spray a little more on, but I wouldn't go heavy with it because you are gonna get a lot of that alcohol kind of smell. But it is still a solid fragrance, not my top favorite. I do like it. I do think it's a very nice masculine, classy signature, but I don't like it as much as the first two. It is still okay in my book, and I would still recommend anybody who likes that style, like Burberry London, you wanna try something different, I would try this one out. Or if you just have the chance to buy this and you wanna try it out, I would say try it out and see what you think about it, but it's still very nice. It is this one here, Cuba Red. Now on to the last one that is in this 4-pack, and it is one that has a blue wrap around it, and it is called Cuba Blue. And as you can probably guess, with a color and name like Cuba Blue, that is gonna be more of a fresh kind of fragrance, and that's exactly what it is. This is one that comes off very strong on the citrus and the florals on the top, mainly the citrus side with a lot of lemon in it. Fragrantica does have a note breakdown on this. You have top notes of tangerine, lemon, and green leaves. Middle notes are patchouli, vetiver, geranium, and sandalwood, and base notes are cedar, amber, and oak moss. And they have it listed that this is a powdery, musky, warm, spicy kind of fragrance, and I don't get that actually at all in this. It may be a musky fragrance, slightly of an aquatic kind of style, but it is more of a very harsh citrus opening with a lot of greenness to it. A tad bit aquatic, ozonic, if you can think about it like that, but it's not really too airy in the modern sense. This smells like a 90s style freshie, but way on the cheaper end. Not anything nicely blended like Cool Water or even CK1, which is one that this actually gets compared to a lot. It is to me, very roughly put together. You probably do get some woodiness as it starts drying down, maybe a little bit of vanilla sweetness, but not as much as the other ones that we looked at, especially the first two. This is way more just citrus heavy. Of course, this will work great for the spring and the summertime. It is very fresh, very bright, but the citruses on this are not that great. And even the orange, the Cuba orange, has a way more realistic citrus on that orange side than this does on the fresh citruses, on the lemon and tangerine and all of that. It is very synthetic, and of course, like I said, this would be expected from these, but this has way more of that synthetic kind of style to it. The other ones at least have good blends that cover that up. This does not really cover it up, especially as it leans into that very citrusy freshness. It makes the alcohol even more dominant and noticeable. So maybe on your skin, if you spray it, especially if you spray enough of it, that it can project a little more, you can smell a little more of it, that it may do better on your skin. It may do better when you wear it, but when I wore it, I really wasn't that impressed. It dissipates very fast. Of course, as a citrus-centered fragrance, it is going to have a very short lifespan. It's a freshie after all, but still, it dissipated even too quick for what I was credited for, especially after smelling the other ones. They lasted way longer than I thought. I thought this one would do the same, and it didn't. But even so, even while it was there, it didn't smell that appealing. It smelled more like what Hey by Alfred Sung smelled like to me, and that smelled like straight hairspray, and I did not like that one at all. This actually does smell a little better than that, but it still reminds me of that, which is not a good reminder. But it may just be me, it may just be my nose, so if you smell this and you think it smells good on you, let me know what you think about it. But to me, this is actually the bottom of the list as far as the 4 that we've talked about in this 4-pack. So I recommend it if you want a good cheapie, if you have nothing else to spend it on, but if you could, I wouldn't suggest getting this one on its own. If you get the 4-pack, you're definitely gonna enjoy the other 3 more than this one. Again, that's just my take on it, but if you do like it, you can always check this one out. It is Cuba Blue. And that was it for the 4-pack here that you can find at Ross for about $10.99 if you look right now. And you might think that that's all I'm gonna talk about, which is that 4 and that be it, but I actually have a extra in here, and it's not one that comes with this. It is one that I got separate from Fragrance Buy when I was doing a lot of orders. I just threw this in to see what it was like, and I actually really like it, and I wanted to include it in here because I want to make sure that I told you about it aside from putting it in a short, and it is this one here. It is Cuba Prestige. As you can see, the wrap on this is actually a brown and gold wrapping. It looks very different, and actually the texture on the bottle is more of a crocodile skin or snake skin kind of look to it, which is very different from the other ones that have that wrinkled paper kind of look. It makes you know this is a very different flanker than the rest of these. This is supposed to be one of their higher quality ones and more focused on making it smell the best it can be, and I gotta say, they actually knocked it out of the park with this one. I did not know what to expect with this, but as soon as I smelled it, I was like, whoa, this is huge, this is monstrous. It was a very loud performer, it just hit me in the face, and I kept smelling it. I wore it on my skin, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I want to go through the notes real quick so I can go ahead and talk about it. On the top notes, you have black currant, you have bergamot, grapefruit, and lemon. Middle notes, you have lavender, cardamom, jasmine, and rosemary. And the base notes you have are amber, cedar, labdanum, oak moss, and vetiver. I want to say real quick that when I first sprayed this, I had a huge whiff of tobacco in this, and tobacco is not a note that is in the official note breakdown, but to me, and maybe it was a mental picture I had in my mind of this being a cigar, I had a huge whiff of tobacco when I smelled it. It just smelled like that very herbal, earthy, aromatic, smoky kind of tobacco, like the kind that you left hanging in those cabinets where they mature, and then as you leave the cigars in those cigar cabinets, it just smelled like you stuck your head in it and smelled it. That's what it was to me. And then I looked at the note breakdown and looked at the fragrances people compared it to and what other people said about it, and I realized that it's nowhere in that at all, that maybe it was just my mind. But there are still a lot of things that I smell with this that are in this, and that carries it even further than what I thought initially. So a lot of people say this actually has a huge similarity to Mugler's Amen, the original for man, which was a fragrance that had a huge hit when it came out with what was known as a gourmand note, that very edible, sweet, baked good kind of nuance in a fragrance. And I gotta say, this does carry that on very well. It has a very good syrupy sweetness to it, like a sticky kind of sweetness. It has that vanilla. I think some people say it has like a coffee kind of nuance and smell to it. And of course it has that very appealing sensuality, and it has that amber kind of resinous in it, that very smooth warmth. It has some aromatics, and it has some citrus on the top, and it has a good woody base to it. It is overall a very, very nice fragrance, very well rounded, very well blended, and on skin, this thing rocks. And not just in the scent profile, but in performance. This is the best performing one out of the ones that I've talked about so far. It is a very, very long lasting fragrance, easily 8 hours plus. And it is a nice projector. I guess it projects a little better the first hour, hour and a half, depending on how much you spray. But that longevity is what really gets it, especially when you consider the price point. This would be perfect for date nights, especially in the cooler months and fall and wintertime, maybe a little bit of spring. But I really could have sworn that I smelled a tobacco note in this. When I first got it, that's immediately what I thought. I let a friend of mine smell it without even knowing what it was, and he was like, man, this smells like hardcore tobacco. Like I just went and got a leaf and smelled it, and it's exactly what I thought. But even so, maybe there is something like that in this, but either way, this is just a wonderful, well-rounded fragrance. Very, very masculine. This is also a very classy fragrance. Even though it is sweet, it is still classy, mature. I think anyone from 25 and up would really like this. And if you are a younger guy who likes older, more mature fragrances, you would still like this very much so. For being so underrated and people look at it and think it's tacky and that it's not gonna smell good, so you're not gonna buy it, I think that's way too much judging a book by its cover, because if you judge it by that instead of by how it smelled, you are doing a great disservice to yourself, because this thing smells incredible. This one to me so far is my absolute favorite Cuba fragrance. I think it is this one, and then gold, and then orange, and then the red, and then the blue one. Those first three, I think, are just knock it out of the park every time. And the red one is okay, but not really the best. And that blue one is just not my favorite at all. This is what really turned me on to them and to want to collect and try out more of them. So any chance I see a Cuba fragrance out in the wild or online, I'm definitely gonna scoop it up if I have the chance. And it all began with really this one here, and then it got into that 4-pack. But this one I highly, highly recommend above everything else. This one here, it is Cuba Prestige. But here they are, guys, the Cuba Paris fragrances, the cigar fragrances is what most people would know them as. From gold to blue, gold, orange, red, and blue are the ones you'll find in that 4-pack that you'll usually see sometimes online, but mostly in rack stores like Ross and Burlington and Marshalls. And then you have the plus one here, the Cuba Prestige fragrances. One I got on fragrancebuy.ca for $5. I just threw it in to add that extra item to help me get free shipping, which is a cool hack, by the way, if you want to try that out. And I was not expecting the quality and the style and scent that I got from it for just that $5 mark. It was just a complete blow away in my mind. I always looked at these fragrances as being something that was on the super cheap end, which they are, but I thought that they would smell terrible, nothing worthwhile, that they were a waste of money, and that everything that they were made out of was cheap, and that it was just gonna be a bunch of chemical sludge, which I will say almost all the makeup of these are probably gonna be synthetic. Again, probably no naturals, but the perfumers that work on these, whoever they are, and the people who invest in it and give whatever kind of vision they can for these, even though they kind of can be considered cologne fragrances in a way, maybe with a little bit of a twist. Still, with what they can do with all those synthetics to make something like this is actually very impressive. So even though they are tacky, even though they are cheap, they are still impressive and a very good underdog. I think this should be appreciated just a tad bit more in the cheapy world. So if you do find these, I highly recommend that you buy them. Check them out, especially if you're buying something from fragrancebuy.ca and you want to add just an extra item to the cart. Just buy one of the many that they have on there, the $5 30 mils. Just throw it in and see what you think about it when it comes in, or buy that 4-pack if you see it at Ross or those other rack stores, and just try them out. Based on this video, the ones that interest you the most, try them out. Let me know how they are. Let me know what you like about them. If you already own some, which ones are your favorite, whether it be the ones right here or ones way off, the newer ones, the older ones, whichever ones they are. Let me know what you think about them, which ones you would recommend that you consider the best out of all of Cuba fragrances that there are. I will do my best to buy them up, get them in and smell them, try them out, and hopefully let you know what they're like in a video. And if you did like it, please consider liking, giving a thumbs up on it, commenting, let me know what you enjoyed and what you'd like to see later. And if you're not subscribed, I'd ask that you please consider subscribing and following me on my journey as I go through the cheap world of fragrances, and I can hopefully help you discover something new as well. But as usual, guys, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I thank you for being here with me, and I will see you all again in the next one. Be blessed.